Okay, we should be good to go.
Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Worcester City Council held by Zoom video conferencing and YouTube this Monday, September 21st, 2020. It is now 7:30 p.m. The last day of summer. Tomorrow will be the first full day of fall. How quickly the year seems to be going. So hope everyone had a great summer. The next meeting will be Monday, October 5th, 2020, and that will be a Monday. Mr. Paulo, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Ansel,
Here.
Mr. Bostancic,
Here.
Mr. Cavan,
Here.
Mr. Myers,
Here.
Mr. Sanders,
Here.
Mr. Silvestri,
Here.
Ms. Warden.
Here.
Well, it's nice everyone's here, so we have a full council, so we definitely have a quorum. The agenda will remain as presented at this time. I would ask you to join the city council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for
for which it
stands,
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the September 8, 2020 meeting.
Motion to approve, Mr. Myers.
Mr. Myers moved to approve the minutes of September 8th. Is there a second?
Silvestri seconds.
All right, Mr. Silvestri seconded. All in favor of approving the September 8 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The September 8, 2020 minutes have been approved. That brings us to item 3, communications from the mayor and administration. And I know somewhere down the road, Mr. Scavelli has a discussion he wants to have with us. So following, I assume, your remarks, Mr. Mayor, we'll have Mr. Scavelli speak. So welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you, President Bytendijk and council members. Great to see everybody this evening. So I'll move through this fairly quickly. Nothing huge to report. It's been fairly quiet over the last 2 weeks, which is actually a refreshing thing to state in this COVID age. So the Wayne County Fair came off well under the current circumstances. I hope you managed to find a day to get down and see some of the animals and the kids that were raising them and selling them. I asked Chief Fisher if he would send out video to city council members from the Attorney General describing the Bureau of Criminal Investigations, or BCI as it's commonly called. I felt it would help people understand the different roles that our police division and BCI play. I'm sorry if you've received it twice, but we have no way to know if council has emailed something directly. There's no way to trace anything that's sent to us under certain circumstances. So if you did, I apologize for loading up your email. I hope you found it useful to understanding the relationship and support from the BCI. They've been a good player for us and in times where we've had to call them. It hasn't been a lot, but in the ones where we needed their help. Mr. Bytendijk had a nice conversation with Sarah Bolton, the president of the College of Worcester. Things seem to be spinning up well for the college, and we wish this important piece of our town the best in the year ahead of them. We have posted on our city website front page information about the 2020 Halloween celebrations. We do not organize a citywide trick or treat in Worcester, but we let each neighborhood group put out information for their area. This has seemed to work very well over the years in the past, and really we don't see any reason to change it, especially in this year of COVID. The guidelines that are posted on our website are what the governor's office has released about Beggars Nights and how to do them safely for all involved. The DORA, or the Designated Outdoor Refreshment Area, went into effect on 9/11. It was a Friday. It seems to be going well. We've had no issues that I am aware of, and being in the downtown the last 2 weekends, it appears that it has increased the amount of people walking around in the evening. So I haven't heard anything directly yet from the restaurants or shop owners saying that it has boosted business, but I'm hopeful that that is the case. So, and I wanted to read you something. It's a message we received on September 17th. It was last Thursday, titled "The Kindest Gesture." Hopefully it'll bring a smile to your face. Somebody unknown to me or to any of us here in the administration, but it starts out, "To whom it may concern. Hello, my name is Daniela. With all the negativity in our nation right now, I wanted to take a moment to write a letter of appreciation to your officers, specifically 2 officers that my children and I had the pleasure of encountering today during our lunch. We are not residents of Worcester. However, we were visiting there to have a field trip at Ramsire Farms. My children, 8, 6, and 4, think of police officers like famous people. They see a police car on the road and they are fascinated. So when they saw real police officers walk into where we were having lunch, it was all they could do to contain themselves. And they were about ready to burst out of their seats to say hello. I gave them permission to say, 'Excuse me, officer,' with both officers, and both officers looked over, smiled, and said hello, spoke so kindly to them, and even offered to show them their police car. I only got one of the officers' names, Jake, and I didn't get the other officer's name, but I wanted to take a moment to write this message to let your department know that you have a great team serving and protecting in Worcester. I was really proud of that moment for my kids to experience, and it will be a memory that they will treasure for a long time. Thank you." We did some tracing and found out it was Officer Jacob Montoya and Sergeant Greg Kolick, who were the 2 people that they met in the restaurant. But they sure make us proud as an organization for putting such a good face on our community, and something those kids will probably remember for a long, long time. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to John Scavelli, and possibly Joel Montgomery might weigh in also, but they have something they wanted to discuss as far as a property acceptance. So John, I'll hand it to you.
So I was contacted by Andrea Euler, who is the head of the civil department at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, and she let me know that they are looking to donate property to the city. It is basically a right-of-way around Old Mansfield Road and some other roads. Joel or Mr. Montgomery will get into exactly where those locations are with you. I think you should have been provided with maps for those. What she asked me was that she wanted to know that we would do it. I told her that we could, if they went ahead and they put it on their agenda and quitclaim the property to us, that we would go ahead and most likely accept it. She said she wanted some assurances from us ahead of time. I said, well, I suppose we could try that. So what we're kind of looking for today is a little bit of a straw poll. More so than anything, just let me know if you're against it. And if we have enough votes not to go forward, then they won't do it. But they just wanted some assurances before they actually conveyed the property that we were going to accept it. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Montgomery. He'll explain to you exactly where these properties are.
Hopefully you received some maps that we asked our engineering division to prepare. You know where the Graham Farm annexation we did a while back. So it's right there. And it appears that there's like an old abandoned road that used to go off a little bit to the west there as well. So this is all right of way or former right of way, road right of way. And it's just a little bit of an odd configuration and a little bit odd that the commissioners, the county actually owns the right of way itself on a couple of these spots. So basically they're asking us to take the right of way that's adjacent to and part of what was that Graham Farm annexation. We already have maintenance agreements with the county and the townships for maintaining the roads there anyway, so it doesn't really change any of that. It's just, it is a bit of an odd process that we're going through. But other than that, it's just sort of cleaning up the way the right-of-way lines are that look like they're left over from quite a long time ago, and maybe some resurveys that were done many, many years ago.
Does anybody have any other questions about the donation of this property?
So it does not appear to be any type of a added maintenance burden to us.
As far as current maintenance, no, we already maintain as far as like snow plowing and, and minor maintenance on those roads as it is. So I guess the only difference would be at some point in the future, if we were to ever, for those, just that intersection, if we were to ever improve that, if the we would do what we do in other places, we would have the developer do that. If somebody were to come in to locate a business there. Otherwise, if that didn't happen, then if we had to do any improvements, yeah, that would be the city that would do those at that time.
But there's no underlying infrastructure issues.
No, I think we have a water line in there, but that's our transmission line.
So basically, the only thing we're looking for, is there anyone who believes that they would vote against it?
I guess I did have a question, Mr. Law Director, if I could.
Sure.
Okay. It sounded like the county approached us, or what is the driver behind it? I was a little confused as to what kind of was driving the process. It looks like a matter of cleanup. I'm amazed that we don't have these easements, I guess. And I know Joel made reference to the fact that these are pretty dated. I guess I was just confused as to how we discovered them or what's driving the transaction here.
So my understanding from my limited conversations with Assistant Prosecutor Euler is that this is annex property. They're just looking to clean it up. And they currently have the right of way because it used to be their responsibility. And now they're looking to get that cleaned up at this point. And that seems to be the only motivation. Obviously, if council doesn't want it, they won't transfer it. So that's pretty much where it's at.
But I mean, it's city street right now, correct, Joel?
Old Mansfield Road is up to right where the Graham Farm property starts.
Malcolm in episode 1.
Okay.
Like I said, it is a bit of an odd process. In the past, what I have seen done is when an annexation happens, and they do the plat, they actually include that property and dedicate it to right of way right in the plat, and then it just it happens as a matter of course when we do the annexation. I'm not sure why that didn't happen here, other than the lines look odd, almost like I think there was a road that was abandoned many, many years ago, maybe decades ago, and where Old Mansfield Road sort of curves and heads to the south. I think there was a road that headed more to the west. And whenever that road got relocated, that right of way sort of got left in no man's land. And you have this little piece in there that somehow the commissioners ended up owning. So it is pretty much cleanup based on what appears to be an abandoned road right of way from many years ago.
Joe?
Yes.
Joel, quick question. So from your standpoint, you don't see a problem at all with this?
No, if under normal circumstances, this would have came in as part of the annexation back when we did it.
Okay.
So was someone just going through records and found that the county still had possession of that right of way, Joel? Is that what happened?
It appears so.
Okay.
That'd be my guess as well.
I remember when that road was straight. Yeah, that's been a while. Is there a bridge a little farther down, or maybe like some sort of something that goes under the road? Do you know?
There was a
Is
bridge
there a
out there.
stream?
Yeah, there was a bridge out there, Mr. Cavan, that went over to the old water plant and came across the stream there, but they took that down once they abandoned that road. So it's no longer there. There's a pipe. They're pumping some water to the stream, and there's a pipe that runs into the Killbuck Creek there that you may have seen, but that's the only thing out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anybody who thinks that they would be in opposition to it? That's the only thing that we need to sort of say today. If you think you're going to be in opposition, just let me know so we know the number. If anyone. Nobody?
No.
Okay, very good. Then we will go ahead and I will let Assistant Prosecutor Euler know that. And my guess is you will see it you will see legislation to accept that on our next agenda.
All right.
Yeah, just provided that there's no cost, that we don't anticipate until then, something coming up maintenance wise.
It's a quick
Like
claim
the
deed. We don't have
County
it.
discovering there's a nuclear dump site and they're trying to pawn it off on us.
I don't know.
It's highly unlikely given the location of the land. It's basically been there used for road right of way, and that's about it. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry too much about that. And like I said, it'll be quick clean to us. There's no cost other than recording fees, basically.
Gotta ask.
That makes sense. That's a smart question to ask.
Yeah.
All right, I guess you probably got your answer there, Mr. Scavelli, and seeing that, we'll move on to item 4, petitions. I don't think there's any petitions. How about communications from the public, Mr. Scavelli?
I have some comments from Ms. Desiree Weber. I'm going to go ahead and read those. So let's see. She says, I have a question regarding the city land purchase item on the agenda. Mr. Millay indicated in the last meeting that the decision to purchase it rests on financial calculation. She also says, what is the timeline for assessing whether the expected bears fruit and that it will be reported to the public has access to it? If not, why not?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there are any land purchases on the agenda this evening.
You are absolutely correct there, Mrs. Warden.
Yeah, we passed that legislation last meeting. Ms. Warden moved to suspend the rules, which was unanimously approved, and that piece of legislation was likewise unanimously approved to be adopted. So
Perhaps Ms. Weber is confused, and so an annexation is not a purchase of land. It's just simply accepting the land from county responsibility into city responsibility. So maybe that was the confusion. I'm not sure.
I don't know if she's going to type in a clarification on that. Why don't we, so those are the only comments that we have so far. I would suggest that since we do have a delay, that maybe we give about 30 seconds for this to get through and for anyone else to type in a comment, just because we have had people that haven't heard it in the past that didn't know this was going to be, that we were stopping comments. So if we just give them maybe a 30-second period to type something else in, and then we maybe can avoid that issue this time.
Feel free to talk amongst yourselves.
Well, it's important because, like I said, people were just caught off guard, and there is a delay between what they see on YouTube and what we're doing. And I think we've tried in the past, but apparently some people have missed it. So I'll wait until 7:51, and then if we haven't got any more comments, we'll assume it closed because I have said that now. So
Of course, with the delay, they won't hear that till after 7:51.
So her question is, she is saying, Ms. Weber wrote back in again, and she said she was talking about the purchase last meeting, which has already been told her that it is not on the agenda. So that would not be a question, but also applies to the maintenance cost for the land that is being transferred, so the annexed land. And she wants to know how we decide whether or not to take it, I'm assuming, given, the maintenance costs for that land.
I can answer the maintenance cost question. We already have a pretty extensive maintenance agreement with the county for all of the roads and right-of-ways around the edges of the city where the right-of-way goes in and out of, and there's half of roads and intersections that sometimes are in the city, sometimes in the county, sometimes in the township. So we have an extensive agreement where we sit down and worked out who does what. Some areas the county does the maintenance, some areas the city does the maintenance, and we have an agreement. So that particular area, we already do the maintenance on it per that agreement. So there's no immediate change, in the cost because we're already plowing and salting and patching right there anyway.
Okay, and with that, I have no further comments, and we did give a minute notice for anyone who does want to write in. I will look at your comments and I will address them. And if we can address them later on to a council at a later time. So we will be moving on then.
All right, thank you, Mr. Scavelli. I don't believe we have any committee reports, but we do have a public hearing regarding annexation of Oak Hill property that will be held by Mr. Sanders. So, Mr. Sanders, I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll open this public hearing related to the annexation of properties. And actually, we discussed this at our public hearing 2 weeks ago. The only reason why we're discussing this is there was 2 parcels that are involved in this that had been omitted from our actual legislation. And so nothing has changed. It's just that for all council members, you can see that we now have 2 additional parcels, which are the ones that are the street right-of-ways that, like I say, had been omitted from the previous legislation. I'll open it up to any discussion, but it seems to be fairly straightforward. I guess with no discussion or no questions, we'll say that we had our public hearing, and we'll close the public hearing. Thank you.
Mike, you're muted.
Thank you. We'll consider this having a public hearing on those, I believe, 4 parcels, several of which I think belong to the city of Worcester, and some with the city schools, which so, and just a little sidelight, unless there's a building code in that township, if we would ever want to, if the school would ever want to build something, they'd have to get the state to approve it. So all the more reasons to get it moved into the city of Worcester. So that being said, that does bring us to the 3rd reading of now the infamous RV ordinance, ordinance number 2020-31 as amended. It'll be presented by Mr. Sanders. But before I get to you again, Mr. Sanders, I will ask Ms. DiPaolo to please read the ordinance.
Amended ordinance number 2020-31. An ordinance amending chapter 351, parking generally of the codified ordinances of the city of Worcester, Ohio by adopting a prohibition against parking or abandoning upon any street a recreational or commercial vehicle.
All right, Mr. Sanders, I turn to you again.
Thank you, Mr. President. As council can see, section A, section 1, subsection A, you can see the red revision portion of this, which is really the only change to the legislation. I guess if there's any if anyone has any questions for the administration related to the modification to it, let's ask the questions and we'll get this moved along.
I think I should just jump in because I think I know the question. What we did here was, first off, if we're going to pass this today, we need to decide how many hours you want. I would still advocate that I think 24 hours is best, given what we're trying to accomplish. However, there have been some people raising 48 or 72, and that's a decision council would need to make if they choose to pass it at all. But we just left that blank for council to make that decision. As for the new amendments, the question came up and said, well, this seems to be only applying now to commercial vehicles between these hours. That's not the case. What the point of that section is or that amendment is there is the section in the code, 351, and I'm forgetting 16, I believe. 351.16 that says no person shall park any semi-tractor, semi-trailer, truck exceeding 5 tons or any school bus on any street of the city from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. And that was brought up saying, well, doesn't that cover some of this? And so we needed to, what we decided we needed to do is we needed to make certain that this new ordinance would not be seen as conflicting with that one. So in this particular case, a recreational vehicle, for instance, your boat or your RV, would never be able to park anywhere except in front of your own home. However, a commercial vehicle could still park in front of places that were not the owner's home any hours between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. And that would include in front of their own home, but they could only be in front of their own home for a 24-hour period. That's what that purpose of the section is. I have been told that there was some confusion as to how it was worded. I understand where that's coming from, so I don't want to say that I think that's an unreasonable question. What I would refer you back to, though, is where the sentence before that, where it specifically refers to both recreational and commercial vehicles. And in that case, if your reading of the new sentence is that means it only applies to commercial vehicles, that would make the previous sentence meaningless, which from a statutory construction viewpoint would not make sense and would not be, if you had to review this, if a court were reviewing it, they would say, well, no, that can't be read that way because the first sentence would invalidate it. So that's my answer to that question. If anyone else has any other questions based on the amendments, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you for the legal clarification. I definitely don't have a legal mind, Mr. Scavelli, so I appreciate your interpretation of that and explaining to me.
Mr. Sanders, this is Scott Myers. I still feel that this basically is somewhat redundant with ordinances we already have in place that prohibit the parking of commercial vehicles, semi-trailers from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. I don't know that we need this law. I would not support it. I think it's overreach. The examples given were predominantly semi-trailers, commercial vehicles. I think there were 2 RV issues that I probably could imagine we could either handle directly under road safety or visibility issues, or we could look at a law that might pertain to those. I would support a 72-hour change if the law were to be considered, but I don't support it in its present form.
I would just like to throw my opinion in. I think as far as how long we should allow rec RV to be in front of a house, I would support a 24-hour. I think it's, if we're going to do it, it should be and make and enforce it. I think you have too much time in there. It's too much of a chance with somebody's trying to park there for a long period of time to play around with it. And if it's for what we're trying to do here, I think 24 hours is very reasonable. So I just want to throw my hat in for that point.
Mr. Scavelli, question I have is how do we then place a time limit in this legislation? Does someone need to make a motion to amend it, to add the hours, and then we'll have to approve the amendment?
What I would do is, it just has a blank right now. So what I would do is I would just go ahead and make a motion to approve with, and say you're making a motion to approve with a 24, 48, 72 hour period.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions or conversation with council? If not, I would motion to approve legislation 2020-31 to read for a time not to exceed 24 hours.
I will second that.
Okay, a motion to adopt with the discretion exercised by Mr. Sanders to put a 24-hour limit, and it was seconded by Mr. Bostancic. Seeing this is a third reading, we'll offer it any more discussion on this. Although I should point out that we presently have a ordinance that prohibits more than 24 hours parking on a city street. And I will also point out that it's incumbent upon someone reporting that to the police department to start that time period.
If I could just jump in real quick, I think, are you talking about Mike 303? What's the section number? Hold on one second. I want to say it's 303. But I believe that there's an argument that could be made if somebody were trying to enforce that, the 303 section, that it basically only applies to abandoned vehicles, which is one of the reasons why we thought this was necessary, because if it's not an abandoned vehicle, you could make an argument that if you were ticketed for that, that it wouldn't apply to you because it pretty clearly is talking about abandoned vehicles, although there's a reading of it that could be for any vehicle. But if that's the section you're talking about, I do believe that.
I'm not sure that's a section, because I had issues on my street with regard to that. I think there's somewhere else that prohibits being parked more than 24 hours.
President Bidendijk, referencing the minutes from last meeting, you had made the suggestion looking at 351.16, 351.16.
That's the commercial vehicle section that I just
Yeah,
read.
that's the commercial.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyways.
All right. Well, if no one has any other questions, then we can move forward.
Yeah. You're going to turn it back over to me, Mr. Scavelli, or you go run the meeting now, sir?
No, it seemed like we had reached a moment of silence.
Yeah. Right. Anything else with regard?
I would point out that I would like to point out that in the red section, it does say the section applies to commercial vehicles parking in front of their property, not the neighbor's property.
Correct. Yes. So
Right.
what it means is, yeah, this only has to do with you parking in front of your own home. You would still be allowed to do what you can do under 351.16, which is why that extra sentence is in there. But it only applies to you parking in front of your own home.
And I thought that was some of the issue that we talked about last time, parking in front of other people's property. and blocking their access as
You
well.
wouldn't be able to do that. You were not allowed to park in front of other people's property unless you're a commercial vehicle parking between outside of the hours of 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. It's the only time you couldn't. A recreational vehicle never could. A commercial vehicle could where it was already allowed in our code.
Mhm.
Well,
Excuse me, I want to make one point of clarification just for just one thing. If I park a passenger car in front of my own home, there's no restriction to how long that car can be there, correct?
If you want to, you could make an argument that there is a 72-hour restriction if you read 303.09 to read that way.
Okay, because I remember being at a traffic commission meeting where someone parked a vehicle long-term, and, you know, we had to take some traffic commission, the commission had to take some action because there was some safety issues associated with it. And it was a pickup truck, for example. But okay, so I guess should we clean up 303.09? Maybe that's a discussion for another day. But I guess I'm more, I can't support the 24-hour, just to go on record as saying, you know, I think 72, if it's in front of my own home and it's my RV and I'm going to plan a trip, I mean, to me, it's reasonable to get an RV out of storage and have 2-3 days before I go on my trip. I think this is too tight, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
Just add on to that though, but I think if you have a driveway, that's where you should be doing it. You know, why do it?
Understood.
You're not allowed to park in your
Understood, but
driveway at
it's
all,
not,
Bill.
it's not always an option. So I'll just leave it at that. We had a lot of good discussion last time, but thank you.
Perhaps we should not allow parking anywhere ever.
It's another discussion.
That's where you're headed.
No, we're not.
Just because you got an issue in your neighborhood that you're trying to attack, you and Mr. Brenneman.
Mr. Brenneman, how did I get pulled into this?
Isn't there a semi on Highland near your place? You mentioned it last meeting.
There was one on Hamilton that I said I've seen a few times.
Hamilton, that was it. But that's already prohibited under the other ordinance, I believe, right?
I don't know if that is or not, possibly, but this would definitely make it clear.
well, anything else? Seeing none, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt, if you would, Ms. DiPaolo?
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Warden,
Your mic's off, Ms. Ward.
Sorry, yes.
Myers,
No.
Sanders,
No.
Silvestri,
No.
and Bostancic.
Yes.
So 4 yeses and 3 nos.
Well, my public school math skills say the yeses have it, so it seems that ordinance number 2020-31 passes. And it can always be revisited, so.
Good point.
Okay, the next ordinance is 2020-35. It will be presented by Mr. Sanders. I see that Mr. Reynolds has joined us as agent for the petitioners, Worcester City Schools and the City of Worcester, and this was the one subject to the public hearing here previously. So, that being said, I will first turn to Ms. DiPaolo to please read the title.
Amended ordinance number 2020-35. An ordinance accepting the annexation of territory on Oak Hill Road comprising of parcels 53-01626.000, 53-00145.000, 53-00145.002, and 53-01626.001, both of which are contiguous to the corporation limits. Robert S. Reynolds Esquire, agent for petitioners, Worcester City Schools and the City of Worcester.
Just a little thing to probably should say all of which,
All.
since there's 4 of them and not 2 of them, but
I can correct that.
that's the trouble of when you're a wordsmith, that you see things like that. I'm surprised Mr. Silvestri didn't catch it because he's usually on top of things like that. So that means it's now time to turn it over to Mr. Sanders.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I guess I will have a question then for the administration is if we've now have to change this again, do we have to go back to and have another public hearing to correct this verbiage as well?
We just, which change did we make now? We added the 2 and we had the.
We're just changing, John. We just went, it had both instead of all in the title. So it's a clerical error.
No, the only reason that I think we would need to do that is if proper notice wasn't given to the neighbors. In this case, I believe proper notice would have been given.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I just thought I'd ask.
It's a good question.
As we discussed 2 weeks ago, we have we have 4 parcels of land, 2 of which are owned by the Worcester City Schools, 2 of which are owned by the City of Worcester, and basically are street right-of-ways. And we have been requested by the schools to annex these 2 pieces of property into the city, which at this point I think really doesn't require a whole lot of conversation. But Mr. Reynolds, do you have any comments that you'd wish to add to the conversation?
No, but thank you for your consideration on this. The issues are pretty much the same we talked about 2 weeks ago. The only change is that we didn't catch this till midway through the meeting last time, is that the 2 street parcels owned by the city were not included in the original draft of the legislation, which necessitated the second public hearing tonight. But from a practical standpoint, the issues are all the same. It's the desire of the schools to bring this all within the same safety services network, and that's what this will accomplish.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. With that, then I would motion to suspend the rules of council and place ordinance 2020-35 on third and final reading.
All right, Mr. Sanders has moved to suspend the rules. Is there a second?
A second.
Silvestris.
Second by Ms. Warden. Would you please call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules?
Cavan,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Ansel.
Yes.
All right, the rules have been suspended. I thought I heard someone talking over me. The rules have been suspended. Mr. Sanders, I look to you again.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Sanders. Is there a second? A second by Mr. Cavan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll, Ms. DiPaolo, on the motion to adopt?
Cavan,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Ansel.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 2020-35 passes, brings us to item 7, new business. First reading is ordinance number 2020-36. It will also be presented by Mr. Sanders, slated for 3 readings. And before I get back to you, Mr. Sanders, ask Ms. DiPaolo to please read the title.
Ordinance number 2020-36. An ordinance stating to the Wayne County Commissioners pursuant to revised code section 709.03 the services which the city of Worcester would be able to provide for parcel 53-01283.000 and contiguous to the corporation limits and declaring an emergency. Matthew A. Long, Esquire, agent for petitioner Stephanie Campbell.
Yeah, and I see Mr. Long has joined us here, so you're welcome to grill him in any way, shape, or form you want. But before that happens, I'll look to Mr. Sanders and turn the floor over to him.
Thank you again, Mr. President. What we have here, we've seen in the past, we have a resident or an individual that lives adjacent to the city, but is outside of our city limits. They are looking to annex into the community, but in order to do that first, we have to state to the Wayne County Commissioners that we will provide the services to this particular resident or this particular future resident as we would any of our other current residences. And so consequently, that's what we have in front of us this evening. And I would normally leave this on first reading, but in light of the fact that this is pretty cookie cutter, cut and dry, I would motion to suspend the rules of council and place ordinance 2020-36 on third and final reading.
Okay, Mr. Sanders has moved to suspend the rules. Is there a second?
John Ansel, second.
John Ansel seconded it. Would you please call the roll, Ms. DiPaolo, on the motion to suspend the rules?
Bastancik,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan.
Yes.
Okay, the rules are suspended. Mr. Sanders.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Sanders. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Cavan. Further discussion about why this individual wants to come into our fine city, and we're always looking for good citizens to come in. So you want to weigh in a little bit on it, Mr. Long? Because I think that every attorney who appears before council ought to at least say a few words if they're going to get paid.
Well, in the interest of time, I will be brief. Stephanie Campbell wants to bring the house into the city limits in order to access utilities. I believe, and this is before my involvement, there may already be a pre-annexation agreement in place here for her to actually connect pre-application. And as part of that, she has to go through the procedural steps of bringing it into the city of Worcester, which brings us here today. About as vanilla as it gets as far as annexations go.
Yeah, and we've had a number here in recent years where issues such as the well not functioning property or the septic system failing. So obviously, especially since they're right on the edge of the city, it probably makes sense to bring them into the city because they're left with no other alternative many times. Anyone else? Seeing none, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Bastancik,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan.
Yes.
All right, ordinance number 2020-36 passes, and we'll look forward to having Ms. Campbell, resident of the city of Worcester, here in the new future. Brings us to our last piece of legislation. It'll be presented by Mr. Ansel. It is scheduled for 3 readings, and if you would, Ms. DiPaolo, read the title of ordinance number 2020-37.
Ordinance number 2020-37, an ordinance authorizing the Director of Administration to enter into an agreement extending the collective bargaining agreement for 1 year with representatives of the Ohio Worcester Employee Association and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. This proposed WEA extension is the same that we approved for the Worcester Police Department and the Worcester Fire Department extensions. And that would be a 2.5% wage increase for 2021 and a one-time stipend payment of $1,500. The reasoning and the rationale is the same as the previous two contract extensions. First, it does provide a better baseline with the economic uncertainty that we're experiencing, and it allows normalizing of the economy. So next year, when we have the same discussion, we'll have a better understanding of the comparative data of other contracts consistent with ours with comparative CERB data. And it will allow other municipalities to create a better comparative for us to analyze our recommended increase for longer contract extensions. And we're certainly recognizing the essential work that was performed by the city staff, including maintenance, water treatment, wastewater treatment, building and zoning, et cetera. This is for the administrative support service and service functions within our city. All of the other contracts remain, provisions of the contract would remain the same. And that was a question that was brought forth just prior to the council session. I had a question from another council representative regarding section 1 of this ordinance. It says summary of terms attached hereto, and in our council packet, we did not have the other terms. I'm assuming the other term is the full WEA contract, and that being noted, all other terms and conditions of our existing 3-year contract would be the same. But that's something that we may want to discuss, leaving this on first reading to have other council representatives see the summary of terms attached here to reference, just to alleviate any uncertainty or questions that they have in their mind. In my opinion, this ordinance 2020-37 is definitive in terms of the 2 provisions, or 3, 1-year extension, 2.5% base rate increase, and a $1,500 stipend. All of the other terms remain the same. We can talk about that momentarily. As a reference, the WE represents 72 city employees. And for comparisons, the fire department has 42 union, and the police department has 39 union officers at present. So very straightforward. It follows lockstep with the other 2 approvals that we've provided, and it gives us another year to analyze, contemplate, and then finalize negotiations next year for longer term extensions. That being noted, is there any concern from other council members regarding the concern that was voiced to me regarding the summary of terms attached here too? Or Mr. Montgomery, you might want to address that before other council members weigh in.
Yeah, I can. You said it very well. The summary of terms is the 2.5% and the 1,500, and I'd be happy. That's really all of the agreement will say is exactly that. And I'd be, like I said, I'd be happy to forward that if somebody wants to see that. It's really the exact same thing we did for police and for fire.
Okay. Well, I'm fine with that this evening, and I think we can motion to suspend. This is consistent with the prior votes that we've made. And if it's a concern to any of my fellow council representatives, we can certainly delay it and wait till a second reading. But I'm fine moving forward unless there are other concerns voiced at this point in time. So I'll raise the question. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery, for weighing in on that. Other fellow council representatives, if there are concerns, please voice those concerns now, or I will motion to suspend the rules and move this to third and final reading.
Mr. Ansel, One of the concerns I have is where it states that it's attached here too, are we legally required to have it attached as part of passing the ordinance? I do understand that it means to mirror the other ordinances, the same as we've done in the past to keep the contracts consistent. And I certainly support our WEA members and the work that they've been doing and the extension for them. That all makes sense to me. I just wasn't sure, because it's stated in the ordinance that it's attached and it's not, if that's an issue.
That would be a good question for Counselor Scavelli.
Okay. So in this case, it says that it's attached. I don't, as long as you guys understand what's in it, I don't really see that as a big deal. I don't think it would be something that would invalidate it as legislation.
Okay, well, we had approved the original contract 3 years ago, and that would be the detail that we would want as a reference. And if there are no other changes, I think that speaks for itself. So that being noted and confirmed by council, I will motion to suspend the rules and move ordinance 2020-37 to third and final reading this evening.
I'll second. John.
Mr. President, we have a second. Your mic's off. I don't want to usurp the president's authority.
Well, that's all right. I have a hard time getting that mute to come off, so.
Because you all know that I adhere strictly to Robert's rules of law.
Well, yeah, yes. Thank you. So there was a motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Ansel and a second by Mr. Bostancic. Mr. Paulo, would you please call the roll on that motion?
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Bastancik.
Yes.
Okay, the
Thank you.
rules are suspended.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Ansel, second by Mr. Cavan, who was waving his hands and putting his thumb up. So any further discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll, Mr. Paulo, on the motion to adopt?
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Bastancik.
Yes.
Ordinance number 2020-37 passes, and thank you, WEA, for working with the city to go another year before probably serious negotiations begin. And we appreciate all you do, and it's because of fine people that we have there with the WEA that this city is a wonderful place to live. So thank you one and all. So that brings us to the miscellaneous portion, and we'll start with Mr. Silvestri.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing to add other than it is encouraging to see all the great feedback come back for our police department, and glad that that they are reaching out to children and making an impact on our community and just being good representatives of the city of Worcester. So I know I've gotten feedback from around the city in the same way, that the interactions, especially lately, I know there's been, with increased risk, there's increased patrol and increased activity. And just, I think even on the part of the citizens, kind of a heightened awareness to keep our the peace that we enjoy in Worcester, to hold that dear. So again, just thanks to the Worcester PD and thanks to the administration for the work you guys are doing. Thanks.
Mr. Myers.
Thanks everybody for the deliberation on all the issues this evening, and I have nothing further to add.
Mr. Sanders.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Ms. Warden.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you very much.
Mr. Cavan.
I can't add anything else either. Thanks.
Mr. Ansel.
Yes, I'd like to just highlight for our viewers and also to reiterate a communique that Mr. Doherty circulated to City Council regarding year-to-date city tax receipts. On behalf of the Finance Committee, we should share great optimism that through 7 months of the most dire economic times that the United States has experienced, our sales tax receipts are ahead of our high watermark year, 2019. Hopefully this trend will continue, but through 7 months, and the high watermark in 2019 was just a little over $12 million. We're tracking 2% above that through 7 months. Compared to the high watermark of 2019, we're $143,000 ahead. In the last 2 months, of the 7 months, June and July, were significantly higher than June and July of the prior years. So during the slow months of peak COVID, we were running consistent, really almost exactly where we were prior year. And now we're trending much higher, certainly with the exception of the hospitality and the restaurant industry. Our local economic market in terms of people buying stuff appears to be very strong for 2020. So I wanted to share that optimism because that's certainly a baseline indicator of the financial stability of Worcester, Ohio, and we should be very grateful for that and celebrate how fortunate we are to have this pace going. And let's remain optimistic that this finished strong through year end. That's all I have this evening, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ansel. Mr. Cavan?
If I could, I wanted to give a brief shout out to our WARCOG. There was a nice piece on Cleveland News featuring Rhodey Walters and some of the work they're doing there with the mobile apps that they're really utilizing their technology. And it was very, very nice. I thought I would give a shout out.
All right, thank you. And good job, WARCOG. Mr. Bostancic, we'll give you the last word this evening.
I just have a quick question for the mayor. I've just had several customers ask me recently what the COVID rates in Worcester and the hospital rates at the hospital due to COVID or have been like the last several weeks. Do you have any real recent information on those?
Sure. Thank you for that question. We have had very few COVID individuals presenting at the hospital and essentially none within the hospital in the last week. So our numbers are way low, and I'm guessing unless there's some type of an outbreak like we had with the one nursing home, I'm guessing we'll go back to yellow status here within the next week or so, just because we aren't seeing anything that is presenting. So yeah, things are what we hope will continue.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to thank Mr. Scavelli of being our producer and also the answering legal questions. So you got a future in television, I think.
I appreciate that.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. President.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Ansel. Is there a second?